Well, good evening, everyone. Noswaith dda. Welcome to the first of the CC4 Museum of Welsh Cricket talks for the year 2023. I'm delighted to be able to say Blwyddyn Newydd Dda, Happy New Year to everyone. And I'm delighted that we have as our guest this evening someone who I used to play cricket with, someone who I grew up with in the shed at Sophia Gardens, and someone who is going to be telling us an awful lot about their career, both in first-class cricket in the UK, as well as in first-class cricket in South Africa, as well as their business career. So, Michael Cann, good evening, Mike.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Indeed it is. And I must say, you're here by public demand because you, together with one of the young volunteers at the CC4 Museum last year, did an absolutely fantastic podcast. And I know the feedback we've had, my colleague Stephen Hedges, who's on the call, we've had some fantastic feedback. So here you are, Canny, and we're going to this evening, we're going to look back on your career, both as a cricketer, as a businessman, as an administrator, and I have to say a good all-round good egg. And the shirt you're wearing, tell us about that. That's a very smart shirt you're wearing this evening.
Well, this is our Wales Over 50s shirt. We've got the World Cup coming up in March in Cape Town. I got involved a couple of years ago through an introduction through Matt Phillips at the time from Cardiff, into Paul Donovan, who's actually on this call, who does so much work for the Over 50s. And remarkably, as a nation, as Wales, we're a tier 1 nation for Over 50s. And so we're going to the World Cup in Cape Town, which is just incredible. So I thought at least I should look like a cricketer, but actually I'm very proud to wear this shirt as well, as proud as I've been to wear any shirt.
And the fact that it looks a little bit like Arsenal rather than Cardiff City, I know you wear Cardiff, you are a bluebird, but the fact that it looks a little bit like Arsenal is purely coincidental.
Well, we left one red just for the distinction.
Of course. Now, I am going to share my screen because Mike, by the way, doesn't know what's appearing. So I'm hoping that can you see this slide, Canny?
Yes, I can. I remember it well.
Okay, so talk us through it.
Well, this is Cardiff under-17s playing in the final of the Western League under-17s trophy. I think that would have been either 1980 or 1981. And I was captain, and Hugh Morris was an underling. Actually, Hugh Morris played a lot of cricket for Cardiff back in the day. And there's some fantastic other cricketers there. Alan Bretlos, who I think is on this call, he's stood there in his red jersey, played in the earlier rounds. But yeah, that was it. Actually, we had a dinner at Cardiff a couple of years ago, the 200th anniversary celebration of cricket in Cardiff. And we gave Hugh a massive round of applause, not for his, not for his England exploits or his brilliant career for Glamorgan, but bringing home the Western League under the 17th trophy, which I think was one of the pinnacles of his career. Certainly was of mine. But yes, I remember well.
Indeed. And I have to say that just so no one is in any doubt, that's you wearing the cap very proudly with Hugh Morris on your right-hand side. I do believe in the back row, just behind you, is actually Andrew Morris, which is Hugh's brother.
It is Andrew Morris, and he was an excellent cricketer as well. And next to him is Julian Francis, who played for St. Fagans. He was a free transfer from Cardiff back in the day.
And who's the guy with the pads on and the gloves?
That is a guy called Bradley Knight, actually, who was a Super League wicket. He went on to become a very good golfer, if memory serves me right. Yeah,
and I believe he's made a living out of being a professional golfer. So that was 1980, and if the there we go. If you haven't changed a bit, Canny. This is you in 1987, I believe. your
Well,
well, at photo call 1987, you can see we've got the photographic bits alongside, but just, I mean, we're going to go through your career in a little bit more detail, but this is just by means of whetting the appetite. But you joined the Glamorgan staff, but you were also then a student at Swansea University.
correct. And also had a mullet, if you look very closely. You remember we used to cut it short at the sides and it grew long at the back, I think.
Indeed. And just so that I know many people on the call, when I said your business career, they may not be 100% sure what I'm referring to. So apart from reading Wisden and the Cricketer and maybe other sporting magazines, what were you reading at Swansea University?
I did biochemistry. My original sort of thoughts were to do medicine, but I always, I thought if there was a chance I could become a professional cricketer, then, you can forget that because, you just will not be able to do both. So I did a part of medicine where I enjoyed the most, which was biochemistry at the time.
Right, brilliant. Now, here you are at Swansea. I can see with batting with you, Colin Metson. I can see on the far left, David Capel. So there's a clue there that it's Northamptonshire. So what is the occasion of this, Canny? Can you remember?
It was actually, I think it was a point in time for Glamorgan that match because I think Steve Watkin took 6 or 7 wickets in the second innings.
Yeah.
And I absolutely ripped through them on a wicket that was very difficult. They had quite a strong attack, if I remember. Greg Thomas was playing for them at the time. I got a couple of good scores in that game, a couple of not-outs actually in both innings, in quite not a hugely high-scoring game, but it was a good game for me personally. But I think it was the absolute breakthrough for Steve Watkin. He just blew them away in the second innings. And actually, from that point, I think you started to see young Welsh players such as myself and others coming into the team and starting to make a more positive contribution. It took a long time to that feed to feed through to Glamorgan's success, but it was a good game for me.
Yeah. And this photo, what's if you haven't spotted yourself already, if you see far left Malcolm Nash in a blazer, you can see Cardiff Athletic Club, of course, to which you were very closely affiliated. We can see some people there with the traditional Glamorgan daffodil on. So what occasion is this, Canny?
Well, this looks like a past versus present sort of affair, doesn't it? Or perhaps it was an ex-players reunion. I'm not sure. There's a few grey hairs there. I see David Lewis, Butch, Alan Jones is there.
Yeah, I think
Lawrence Williams. Good Lord, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's Roger Davis squatting, Tony Lewis, Brian Davis there as well, squatting front right, and just behind him, Ivy and Jones, and just alongside Hugh Morris is Peter Walker. This is actually the photograph taken ahead of a game, not at Sapphire Gardens, but the floodlit game at Cardiff Arms Park, which had been organised for Rodney Ontong's benefit year, I think in 1989. Between the Glamorgan team of 1989 and the Glamorgan team of 1969.
Oh yes, I remember now, because it was played under lights on a mat, one short boundary once. I think Roger Davis took a hatful of wickets, didn't he? From memory.
Your memory does not fail you. And there's someone also sat on the front row, someone who you and I, as young occupants of the shed back in the mid-1970s, someone who we saw and we really thought was the bee's knees. And there sat on the front row, third left, the one and only Majid Khan.
Yeah, magnificent player. What a player. What a player. Well, what a joy to be a child to watch him bat at Cardiff. Absolutely magnificent to have the type of heroes we had as overseas players who came to Glamorgan in the 70s. And, it was funny because I was thinking about the 70s and the thing that inspires and makes you fall in love with the game. It's those sort of moments that do come back to you. But the other thing about Cardiff and the association with Glamorgan, of course, Cardiff's ground was, it was a club ground which Glamorgan used, and only had limited access to it. But one of the joys of it is that, see that sign in the background, Andrew?
Yeah.
I can tell you now, for the entire existence of that stand, one or more of those letters had always fallen off. Right? And it is just, whatever you look at, it's either the A from the Athletic or the F there from Cardiff, and it had always fallen off. So apologies if my eye is drawn from that. But what a great photograph. That's lovely to see, actually. Yeah,
and on there, some of the people who we're going to be talking about a little bit later on, as we go into more detail. This is just the hors d'oeuvre, as it were, before the main course of talking about Michael Cann. If I go into Eamon Andrews mode, this is your life. But here we can see some great names, and to be able to rub shoulders with some true Glamorgan greats there. For you then, obviously, as an uncapped player there with your Glamorgan club sweater. Now here we are again, 1990, and a team photo. You're there standing in the middle row, far left, alongside a very youthful Dean Conway, it must be said, the long-serving Glamorgan physio. Now there's a gentleman there to your left, to the right as we're looking at it. On the front row, we can see Hugh Morris and Jeff Holmes, but just behind them, a gentleman there with a moustache. People may not immediately recognize that Glamorgan player. So Canny, just tell us who that is.
To my left, to my right as I look?
To your left, as you...
yeah, that's Nigel Cowley.
Yeah.
Tremendous bloke. Good signing at the time, actually. It was always questionable, the value of signings of people later on in their career. But Nigel was a very excellent off spinner in county cricket, played for Hampshire and played in South Africa as well. And really came in to fill a good gap at the time, I felt. Was great with the younger players too, because he wasn't necessarily a first team regular. And I think that was happening at the time when Robert Croft was, and he's in this photograph I see, sort of just starting out. And actually, from that perspective, it was a good stopgap player to bring into the team, very experienced. And as I said, was actually fantastic with us younger players at the time. I think what's interesting, of course, about this photo as well is actually there's a lot of young cricketers here who went on to do some really good things as well. And a lot of local players in this photograph.
Yeah, just in case anyone doesn't immediately recognize, back row, standing up as we're looking at it, extreme far left, Mark Davis, Sparky, decent spinner, did have a career with Gloucestershire as well. Guy called Neil Pook alongside, who I believe now runs a coffee emporium in Australia. Steve Bastian, swing bowler par excellence. Richard Nankaru is the gentleman there. Just before we get to Mark Frost, of course, long-serving person at Sophia Gardens, not just as a player, but now doing excellent work with Cricket Wales, and of course, my boss in the community department here at Glamorgan Cricket. Hamish Anthony is the next gentleman with Kamal Samaya, another spin bowler, now a very successful business person in Australia. Tony Cotty, fresh from his days as a Swansea City footballer. I know, Canny, I mustn't mention Swansea City too much because you're a diehard Bluebirds fan. And then a very youthful, very bashful looking Robert Croft. This was Crofty's first ever team photo, 1990. Crofty, of course, had made his Glamorgan debut the previous summer at the Oval against Surrey. And on that middle row, as I said, Dean Conway, your good self, Canny, Nigel Cowley, Simon Dennis, former Yorkshire left arm bowler, smudger, Ian Smith from Durham. He did go back to Durham a couple of years later to play for them when they entered county championship cricket in the summer of 1992. We've got Martin Roberts then, the reserve wicketkeeper, and then, of course, the one and only, the great, the legend, Don Shepherd. Did Shep give you any advice as an up-and-coming spin bowler, Canny?
He certainly did, actually. And actually, you know, he got you to bowl with pace and rigor on the ball. And I think that's something I really learned from him. And that's particularly valuable in bowling on wickets in South Wales, because you can't bowl it too slow. You don't get the quick turn on Welsh wickets, slow, low wickets. You know, you had to impart energy on the ball. So that was very much a part of that. And I think you saw that in the way Robert Croft developed, who's become, no doubt in my mind, the best Welsh cricketer who ever played. Looking at, he played Test cricket, got the best players in the world out at the highest level. So I think, he was a massive force for good at the time. And a great pragmatist, right? Wouldn't get overly worked up about too much technical theory, because in the end, the philosophy is you're there to get batsmen out. You have to learn how to do that. You can improve in certain areas, but actually it was that massive experience of how to adapt and adjust to the conditions at the time. And you got to feel sorry for the guy, because his record is amazing. Never played for England, and people can label you, can't they? Well, you can take wickets at Swansea because he used to turn when he played, but actually that's nonsense. He took wickets every single place he ever went.
Yeah, and 21 tests, a shed load of one-day internationals, more appearances for England than any other Glamorgan player, and the only person so far, and actually probably the only person ever, who'll score over 10,000 first-class runs and take over 1,000 wickets for Glamorgan. Remarkable. I did once say to Crofty about that record, and he said, Higgers, he said, if anyone beats it, they're going to be blooming tired. So, okay, let's look at the front row then. Far left, John Steele. Youth, as I think everyone knew him as in the twos. Now, he was your captain, as we'll talk about a little bit more detail, but just to kick the ball rolling, any memories of John's advice when you were making your way?
Yeah, I think John's contribution to Glamorgan and Welsh cricket is very much understated, all right, and should be celebrated more, all right, and recognised much more. Because, it's not something that sometimes what you do with the big moments, all right? It's sometimes all the other things that go on in a cricket club or in a cricket team that people don't always notice. John was absolutely superb. And you've got to remember the cohort of players, of Welsh players that came through in the 80s, which was extensive, which got filtered through the system in the 80s and early 90s, myself leaving in the early 90s, et cetera, and those who survived and thrived in the professional game, brought the championship home in 1997. That filter, John was a massively important part of in helping players develop. And he's a real unsung hero behind the scenes. He's currently president of the Ex-Players Association and is now living up the road from me, because I've just moved to the Mumbles on the Gower. So I look forward to seeing a bit more of him in the future.
Yeah. Now, Colin Metzner alongside you, outstanding wicketkeeper. We'll hear more about Meto's keeping a little bit later, but someone then next to Meto who's no longer with us, someone who was another outstanding Glamorgan player, someone who wore his heart on his sleeve, Jeff Holmes.
Yeah, and what a lovely bloke, and the thing about professional sport is, a lot of these people you're competing against for places in the side. You could pick 4 or 5 of us in that pick, who you would think were competing for maybe one or 2 places occasionally in the Glamorgan first team. And you know what? He was so gracious. He was always helpful, irrespective of he might be somebody that myself and Tony Cotty or others in this picture would be looking to grab his place in the Glamorgan first team. And I've got to tell you, Andrew, the story is not complete there for me, because his son Greg is captain of Cardiff now, and he is one of the most superb guys you could ever meet. All right, he's been captain of Cardiff for the last 7-8 years, and I've no doubt Jeff would be immensely proud of the contribution he's made to Cardiff Cricket Club. And, and I'm not surprised he's turned out like that, because Jeff was a fantastic bloke and an outstanding batsman and more than useful medium pacer.
Yeah, very well said, Canny. I think we all owe a massive debt of gratitude for Jeff, not only with his work with the Cricket Board of Wales, but in bringing up a young man in Greg who plays the game in the proper way. And yeah, far worse people I've seen play county cricket. Now, Hugh Morris, Phil Carling, Alan Butcher there in the middle. We'll talk a little bit further, but just between Alan Butcher, or just beyond Alan Butcher, as we're looking on the right-hand side there, another Glamorgan legend, Stephen Royston Barwick, known to one and all as Basil. What are your memories? Well, have we got long enough?
Well, I can tell you now, I love the bloke. I absolutely adore the man. He was one of the most extraordinary characters I've ever played cricket with. And he had times when he was in and out of the Glamorgan first team. Okay. And I probably played quite a bit of cricket with him in the second team. But there was never a day when the ball went to him, he wouldn't bowl all day for you, whatever team he was in.
Yeah.
And his record is outstanding. He got better as his career developed. Not everyone can say that. And he was just had the most remarkable ability to do two things. One, to bowl a ball on the smallest target you'll ever see. And secondly, after a day's cricket, to drink 6 to 8 pints and come back the next day and do it all again. A phenomenal bloke.
Absolutely. I'm not saying I was there drinking 6 or 8 pints of beer or lager with him, but I know that he ate, slept, drank, smoked cricket. And it's wonderful, actually, Canny. I don't know many people, I don't think many people are aware that Steve does come to Sophia Gardens. He doesn't come up to the pavilion. He doesn't, he just keeps himself to himself and is enthralled in the game. And it's great. I know my several colleagues have said how nice it is to see Steve sat in the ground.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to seek him out if he's at the ground, because we can sit there. I've stopped smoking nowadays, but it'd be nice to chew the fat. Metaphorically over the cigarette with him.
Absolutely. We've then got Matt Maynard. We'll talk more about Matt shortly, but there's someone there next to Matt who clearly, again, played a massive role in terms of what you mentioned earlier, Canny, about the emergence, the development of young cricketers in Wales. And again, just like Jeff, sadly, someone who's no longer with us. We're talking there about John Derrick, the one and only JD.
Something that just came to mind, actually, because, and I probably haven't mentioned this to anybody, but when I was coming back from South Africa in 1994, there was a vacancy now for the Glamorgan second team captain. And I applied for it, because at the time I was still a professional cricketer, as did John Derrick. And I can't remember whether it was second team coach or whatever the role was. Anyways, it was he or I at the interview. And I was over the phone down in Paarl in South Africa, in the Boland, where I was playing at the time. And he had his interview there. And thank God they appointed him. That's all I can say. Because I would have been absolutely rubbish at it. And he was very special at getting the best out of young players.
Yeah. And I think the emergence of the current generation of young Glamorgan players, those are the people who John will have identified in their early teens and have been nurtured and have come through the pathway. And the legacy of John Derrick, I'm glad to say, is still alive and strong. And
it is, if you go to Aberdare, up in the top of the Cunnan Valley, you'll see exactly that, because that club is absolutely outstanding. It's got 3 or 4 cricket fields. It's got a lovely pavilion, and a lot of that's down to John and his brother and others. But it's a fantastic club.
Well, that leads me very nicely on, Canny, because I can remember pottering around in the Cardiff and District Midweek League, in the Morgannwg League, playing against John, playing against your good self. So I think it's an approach. Well, and John's brother and his father and other members of the family. So I think actually it's an appropriate time that we, if I just end this this photo montage, if we just talk about then your development, your emergence. Now, if I'm right in saying you are a Llanrumney boy here in Cardiff. You went to St Craddock's Primary School and then St Ichtid's, and just like myself with Graham Lewis at Llanishen High School and many others of our generation, there was a school teacher who helped to inspire you and to drive you on to your dream. In your case, Canny, who was it?
That was KD Williams, or Ken Williams, or Mr. Williams, as I still call him when he comes to Cardiff Cricket Club. He's still involved in the club after the best part of 50 years. He's an absolute gentleman. And not an easy environment to be a teacher in, St Ichtid's at the time. Quite a rough and tumble sort of school. Main catchment area, Llanrumney, Trowbridge, Eastern Cardiff. And he was head of geography, but he happened to be my form master for 5 years, you know, and that meant taking the register and you know, writing the reports and all that sort of stuff. So he was incredibly kind to me, because all I wanted to do was talk about cricket to him. And eventually, after a couple of years of haranguing him, he organised. We didn't play cricket at St Ichtid's at the time. You know, it was actually it was a baseball school, rugby and baseball. You know, people like Dave Bishop came from St Ichtid's at the time. You know, went and played rugby, so you know, that was its strength. But we played baseball, amazingly enough, because Llanrumney was a powerful baseball team back in the day when baseball was quite popular. It used to be televised on TV, and he said, "Come on in," and we sort of, a few of us went off to what was basically an indoor six-a-side football thing in a barn, and he dug out some old kit and some old bats, and there were some plasticky balls, and we had a bit of a session, 3 or 4 of us. A guy called Steve Crandon, funny enough, who went on to be a very good rugby player also. Old friend of mine, Kevin Childs, and 3 or 4 of us who just wanted to play cricket, cracked on and got on with it. And I started to hit the ball, and then he suggested maybe I want to come along to Cardiff Cricket Club practice nets in the Jubilee Hall at Sophia Gardens, for those of us who can remember it.
Well, I was in Jubilee Hall only yesterday afternoon. We had a group of Year 5 pupils from St Monica's Primary School, just off Whitchurch Road, and they were running around with some of my colleagues, and we do say that they were stepping in the footsteps of giants of Glamorgan cricket. So I must include you, Canny, in that. Now, I know you were a bit like me, playing with a tennis ball in the streets. There I was in Llanish, and there you were in Llanrumney. Probably that's the closest comparison we had. But I know our paths did cross in the summer of 1976, because there was a game, or the summer of 1976 will be remembered as the summer when the West Indies tourist team were playing England, and Tony Greig had made a rather unfortunate comment about making the West Indies grovel. And I know that when Tony Greig and the Sussex team turned up at Sophia Gardens, Glamorgan had a spin bowler. He only had 1 year with Glamorgan. What a year it was. Tony Allen, from plucked out of minor county cricket, the son of a dairy farmer. And Tony Allen took 8 for 63 to bowl Glamorgan to victory against Sussex. And I know our paths crossed because we were sat not too far away from each other, cheering on. And I do remember, I must apologise, I do remember shouting out with my friends, giving Tony Greig a little bit of grief. Do you remember that, Canny?
I remember it well, and I remember it for a number of reasons. Yes, you're absolutely right. I remember going on the Saturday, a friend of mine at school said, well, if you want to really get involved with cricket, you've got to go watch Glamorgan. I had no idea it even existed at the time. So off I went on my own, and I never paid. right? I don't even remember. Used to walk around the back of the Taff and the old white stand at the back, right? And there's a big hole in the fence, and we just used to creep under that and then creep into the back of the white stand. To call it a stand, it was a shed. You're absolutely right. So I crept in and sort of watched the game with a couple of mates, and then wandered over, because you could almost touch the balcony there at Sophia Gardens, couldn't you? If somebody got on their shoulders, you could have a conversation with the next man in, right? And there was Tony Gregg, and I'd seen him on telly give that grovel speech, and he's this great big blonde gladiator chewing gum with his hat and his his collar up and all the rest of it. As he did, he sort of stood out, didn't he? And
That's right.
And I thought, crikey, I wouldn't mind being like that. That's a good one, isn't it? Anyway, there was no game on the Sunday, and we came. I was hooked then, so I came back on the Monday, and then there was even less stewards on duty, so it was even easier to nick in those days. And absolutely watched Glamorgan win. I think Gwyn Richards got some runs, funnily enough. I'm pretty sure Gwyn Richards, because he told me the last time I saw him, right? And Glamorgan won the game. So I thought, well, absolutely, this is a team to watch. Every time I watch them, they win a match. Of course, wasn't always like that in the 70s.
No, but there was another game, I think, when we were both there, when this was 1978, Sunday League, 1976, sorry, I'll get it right. The end of 1976, when Somerset arrived on the verge of the Sunday League title. They just needed to win to beat Glamorgan. We hadn't had a great summer. And, well, the rest was history. I seem to remember, Canny, that certainly when I arrived, I think you and I heading over to the shed, we found it quite difficult to find some seats, because it felt like half the population of Somerset were there.
I think the whole population set off. Most of them got drunk on cider, so they never made it. But I think there were 2,000 or 3,000 Somerset fans there at the time, weren't there?
Yeah.
And I think they got there before the stewards. The average age of the stewards getting into Glamorgan in those days must have been anywhere between 70 and 90. So they weren't to be a force to keep people out. And anyway, the game went on, and it was an amazing game, wasn't it? It was that game when the BBC had the helicopter flying around between, was it Kent and Cardiff? I can't remember.
It was, yeah.
And for all intents and purposes, it looked like Somerset were going to win it. And it went down to the last ball, and I can remember it clear as day now, bowled by Malcolm Nash. I can't remember who he was bowling it to. But
Graham Burgess.
Was it? Graham Burgess, the umpire, yeah. And came up to bowl, and he bowled a waist-high full toss, I'm sure he did. And he sort of spliced it somewhere and got run out, and it was a tie. And Somerset had blown it. And I thought, well, this is fantastic. Glamorgan can't lose when I'm watching. It's absolutely brilliant.
Well, you should come along more often, because I know the late 1970s and the early 1980s, they were difficult years. But by then, you were now playing in your early teens. You were playing now for Cardiff Cricket Club. Am I right in saying that it was about when you were about 14 that you played your first competitive game for Cardiff?
It was. In some ways, I was a late starter. My very first competitive game in men's cricket was against Lisvane Cricket Club, which has now gone from a social side, as it was in those days, to very much a powerful club in Welsh cricket, which is great to see.
Yeah.
And then the second game I played was against Penarth Thirds for Cardiff Thirds. What's remarkable about this story is 42 years later on, Andrew, I'm still playing for Cardiff Thirds. So, not really much of a journey, is it, to be honest? Anyway, so yeah, I remember that really well. And actually, I think there's a couple of people here. I mean, Peter Goodfellow, who, bless him, has passed on now, who was a teammate of mine at Cardiff in the early 80s, in the first team later. His dad was captain. He was an absolute legend of Penarth Cricket Club.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I remember it well. Very good.
And Peter was good enough, Peter Goodfellow Jr., good enough to play also in the Glamorgan second 11 and under 25 team there in the early 1980s. Now, you also, because of course then in terms of the coaching structure, Tony Caudle had hung up his boots, of course, having had a glittering career not only with Cardiff Cricket Club, but also with Glamorgan since the early 1960s, had come over part of the Windrush generation.
Yes.
And Tony now was giving something back to the game, and he was helping to coach you. And I know he was a very strong advocate of you.
He was, and actually, you know, there's a lot of luck involved in making a name in professional sport or just rising through the ranks. You do need advocates, you do need mentors, and you do need coaches. And it's only when you look back you realise quite the impact that he made, because he pushed and promoted me within the club and all the rest of it, and that was really good. The coach was excellent. There were other players at Cardiff, other people at Cardiff who were quite remarkable people. You don't realise at the time they're looking out for you as a young player, and it still goes on, and it goes on in both Cardiff Cricket Club and other clubs that I see around South Wales. And people like Paul Good, who actually, funnily enough, was probably as good a player as I've ever come across at club level. Could have played county cricket, I'm sure. He was superb. He was someone I aspired to be, opening batter for Cardiff. Tony Edwards, David Herbert. A guy called Mervyn Owen was captain of Cardiff Thirds, and he'd come to Lanram and pick me up, give me a lift, because we didn't have any cars. You know, it was 2 buses to Sophia Gardens, and people forget just what an impact that can have on a young person's life. You know, because the club started to remove obstacles for me, and I wanted to practice and play as much as I possibly could, and it was just the perfect environment. It was a very correcting environment behaviourally. You couldn't get away with anything. You know, you would be pulled back into line if you misbehaved or were disrespectful to the umpire, and all these sort of good things. Or if I had a tantrum, as I did one time, when I sort of dropped the ball and it rolled along the floor and the batsman whacked it for 4, and I didn't know the rules well enough, had an absolute tantrum. And, you know, the captain, which was Tony Edwards at the time, took me aside and he said, "You can cut that out or you can go home," quite simply. He said, "We'll play with 10. It's up to you." And that sort of put me in my place a little bit. You know, little examples like that teach you to be a better person, a better player. You don't realise at the time what's going on. So for me, cricket, when I look back at my age now, has always been a force for good for people, you know, and helps people become just better young adults. And so I've got that plus my cricketing career.
Yeah, I think that's something certainly in the community department here at Glamorgan at the moment. We do carry on those messages and making sure that people play the game in the right spirit, and they want to be remembered for all the right things rather than the wrong things. So I know that, just to develop that point about Tony Caudle, I know Tony played a big hand then in you being invited into the Glamorgan Youth or the Glamorgan Cult setup. And if I'm right in saying, Cammy, I think it was the year 1983 that you made your Glamorgan second team debut against Gloucestershire.
Yeah, I did. I remember it well. Kevin Lyons was also a very good coach and had quite an instrumental effect on me as well. He was captain of the second team in those days. Tom Cartwright was the other sort of coach who had immense support and impact. And there were 1 or 2 others around at the time, like Malcolm Price at Newport, who also did immense contributions to Welsh cricket and to Glamorgan. But yeah, the debut was on a boiling hot day at Bristol, and it was the flattest wicket. What a great place to play your first game as a top order batter as a youngster, and I was lucky enough to get a few runs that day.
You're very modest, because you were out for the Australian Devil number, which for those of you who aren't familiar with cricketing jargon, that's 87, and Malcolm Nash was captain. Am I right in thinking that? He
was, actually, and Malcolm was right towards the end of his career. If I'm right in saying 997 first-class wickets.
Yeah.
And he came into the second team. Clearly, you know, his career was coming to an end. He wasn't objective. And it was remarkable because he used to smoke, as a lot of cricketers did back in the day. He was sponsored by Benson Hedges and Imperial Tobacco and all the rest of it.
John Player especially. Yeah.
And I think Kevin had a few extra players that day, and I think maybe 13 in the dressing room. So Kevin didn't play, and so Malcolm captained the side, and he walked out to bat, and he came back in, and we all sat there, and I'm as nervous as can be, thinking, "Oh my God, am I playing? Because it's 13, and if I play, where am I gonna bat?" And he won the toss, and everyone looked at him, and it's quite a long changing room up at the top at Bristol.
Yeah,
and he lit a cigarette. And in only as Malcolm Nash could do, he said, "Gentlemen, I've won the toss and we are creaming it." And I think we got 400 for 2 or something like that. And it was just, that's probably my biggest memory of the game, not the runs I scored. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
Did
you open the batting on that day, or were you in the middle order?
I think I opened the batting from memory, and they had a guy called Sean Tracy playing for him. He was very quick, actually.
Yeah.
And he went on to play for New Zealand. He was very, very quick. Played for one of the Western League teams as well.
Yeah. Well, that was the catalyst then for Glamorgan offering you a contract. As you said earlier, you were thinking about reading medicine, Cambridge University, but actually it was Swansea University that won. So your A-levels in physics, chemistry and biology. Biochemistry then was the natural fit. And so for the next couple of years, I'm sure to the great pride of your mum and the rest of your family, there you were reading biochemistry at Swansea University and further developing your cricketing career. So what are your memories of that you can share with us of your student days as a cricketer and as a student?
It's a good question. I actually took a year off between my A-levels in '83 and so I played a full year for Glamorgan in the second team in '84, which was
and scored 1,000. Didn't you score 1,000?
Scored 1,000 runs. Yeah. We played a lot of games that year, in fairness. It was great. Got a few hundreds, and I was a little bit disappointed not to get a run in the first team, or a nominal game at the end of it. But life goes on. So off I went. It did reinforce actually having, I thought, what was a successful season, and not got a game for the Glamorgan first team, albeit as young as I was. It did sort of reinforce in my mind that actually this is a precarious profession. If you think you've done well and you don't get recognised, then actually you do need something else. It did reinforce my mum's view that I should go to university, because she was concerned I would just be a professional cricketer. And, it wasn't her idea of a bright kid. So I went and did it. And actually, I think in fairness, it sets your professional cricket career backwards. But actually, it does round you in a slightly different way. And made some great friends, and met my future wife here at Swansea University, Caroline, who's on the call. People like Dean White, who's a lovely keeper for Swansea University. And we got into, Swansea University made a progression. It allowed me to play in that time for the first time in the first year that the combined universities was open to all universities. Now, this is quite remarkable when you look back in today's age and think that combined universities that played in the Benson Hedges Cup for the best part of 15 years or whatever was just selected from Oxford and Cambridge in those days, a real throwback. And it was the first year that it was open to the red brick universities, so to speak. So I played in that, and that was remarkable because I got to play at Lord's and all those sort of things as a young man, and that was fantastic. And actually trailblazers, because Swansea University latterly won the UAU, and when Steve James and Adrian Dale did so well, and Ewan Rees for that matter did so well playing for them, and brought home the trophy, which is a remarkable achievement. So Swansea was becoming a sporting university and offering bursaries after that, which was a real force for good for both cricket and rugby at the time. Glorious time for me in that, you're finding yourself, you're learning. Cricket became part of my life, when you're studying, but also it meant that I left Cardiff and went to play for Pontydillas. And Pontydillas is probably one of the most wonderful community cricket clubs in Wales, and I still have very, very good friends there now that I'm see on a regular basis. So that circle's been sort of complete. I was their pro at the time, Andrew, for the Bont. It's quite as an 18, 19-year-old, it's quite a tough thing to do, because actually suddenly you're the person in the dressing room that, instead of being the up-and-coming protege, you're the guy's got to deliver day in, day out, 20 Saturdays, right? And gives you that extra bit of resilience. Actually, I found it quite hard, really hard, but the guys were great, and we won the league, the South Wales Cricket League, Cricket Association League as it was in those days. But so they used to pay me, and it used to get this little envelope on a Saturday, you know, you put it in your pocket, and I'll never get the first day, right? Because the guys came up to me and said, there's a bit of a tradition on your first day as a pro in the league, you have to buy all the players around. You have to buy them a drink. I said, fair enough. That seems to me entirely reasonable. What do you want, boys? So half my fee went on the first round. And then about 45 minutes later, the chairman came up to me and said, oh, you know, well done on being our pro, and great, we've won the first game. Are you aware of the tradition? You have to buy the committee a drink on your first game. And I said, well, yeah, absolutely. I can fully understand that. So, well, the committee, now the Podadillas committee, it was a committee of 6, but that night there was a committee of about 18. So by the time I bought the 2 rounds, I was already overdrawn. And that was my introduction to being a club pro, which was the thing that makes you grow up as quick as anything when you're trying to aspire to be a professional cricketer.
Yeah, and playing as a student, playing in club cricket and playing for Glamorgan's second 11, all part of the stepping stone and, as you say, the transition into the world of professional cricket. Now, you said you played in the B&H as it was, but by this time you were on the verge of making your Glamorgan first-class debut. So just talk us through that and how proud you felt walking out in the Glamorgan sweater, making your first-class debut.
Well, all sorts of things go through your mind, and I made mine at Chelmsford. It was the last game of the season against Essex, so I think I'd already won the championship, and they had a powerhouse team: Graham Gooch, Neil Foster, Derek Pringle, lots of superstar players. But actually what comes back to you in that moment, or what came back to me in that moment, were things like we've discussed, looking back to that day in 1976 when you were watching Glamorgan as a kid, and your heroes at the time, people like Alan Jones and left-hander, of course, and Michael Llewellyn, who's left-handed, people you enjoyed. And you just feel an overwhelming sense of joy to play, to be honest. You can't sort of believe that things you'd go to sleep dreaming about, you'd actually get a chance to do. And, you know, they're lovely things, lovely memories to have. You know, professional sport is tough. And, you know, those sort of memories, when I think back now, are absolutely delightful, you know. And we beat them, by the way. We beat Essex last game of the season. So there's this, maybe a bit of a theme there. I don't know. First game I saw, first game I played. Who knows, Andrew? I don't know.
Well, there may be a book there. There may be a book. That this might be the title, but I know in 1989 at Neath, of course, I'm mentioning the Knoll because in the 1980s, Glamorgan secured a massive sponsorship deal. Tony Dillaway, the club's marketing executive, then together with Phil Carling, a massive deal with the Neath Development Corporation, of course, the Lower Swansea Valley, the areas of copper mining and other iron and smelting, collieries, all having closed, needing regeneration. And in order to assist the regeneration and the rebranding of the Lower Swansea Valley as a tourist destination, what better than to host matches against the 1985 Australians, the 89 Australians, and the 93 Australians. Well, I know in 1993, I've got vivid memories there of Matthew Maynard hitting 100 before lunch and swatting Shane Warne all over Neath and further parts. But in 1989, you had that honour of playing against the the Australians. I believe they were led by Alan Border, is that right?
Yes, they were. And actually, they put a pretty decent team out against us as well. Yeah, I remember Steve Wall getting me out. I didn't get any runs, but it was just an absolute delight to play against them. And they were a good bunch of blokes as well, actually, because it was a social evening. I think we were hosted somewhere to sort of a joint event. It was nice just to touch shoulders with the Wall brothers and these sort of things. Fantastic experience, really. Yeah, and 1989 was probably, you know, when I look back for the more than clearly the best year I'd had. You know, so it was nice to get a chance to play against Australia.
And your maiden 100, and you were making hundreds as well in the second team. What are your memories of that?
Second team, and being a fringe player is quite tough physically, because what you'll find that what happens is you'll be picked for the first team, and maybe you've sort of done quite well, but also you find yourself also having to play in the second team. So you may play a championship game in those days on the Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, and then play in the second team Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And depending on how things and injuries, how things will go in, you're often jumping in and out of teams. So you end up playing more actual days than most. And I think I played 17 days on the trot once, which was really tough. But it was all about trying to take the opportunity at the time, and then get into the first team. My first class debut against Somerset was at Cardiff, which is an absolute delight at Sophia Gardens, and I remember it very well. We were chasing. I can't remember if it was any forfeitures, but anyway, there was a declaration, and we were left to score to get probably 300 or so of 60 odd overs. You know, that sort of total, and we got off to a reasonably good start. I think Butch and I put on a few, and then we got ourselves in a really strong position, and we were going well. You know, got into the 90s, and I thought, oh my God, look at this. I suddenly realized what was going on. I thought, well, I can't get stuck here, you know, because we're on a run chase. We need about 4 or 5 and over, need another 100 or 20 over. I thought, I can't go into. I thought, crikey, I wish it was like the first day and I could block it for an hour now and get the last 10. So I thought, well, anything outside that sum, I'm just going to throw the bat off it, throw the bat of it, and see what happens. It's my day. It's meant to be anyway. It came off, and we got through it, and then I got my first class debut. I think in hindsight, I should have seen it through and won us a game with Ravi Shastri, because he and I put on quite a few, I think, in the build-up, and then picked marks pretty much for the whole of the, you know, had a big in-outfield, and a few of the boys got caught in the boundary. Because again, we probably should have won. You know, a more mature team would have won, or perhaps, you know, maybe if I had a bit more experience under my belt, I could have brought it home with 140, 150 not out. But it was still nice to get off the mark. And at Cardiff, and you know, I never forget raising my bat and then Stuart Dyke up in the bar waving and clapping and those sort of things, you know, and those sort of memories are the things that sit more with you now than sort of, you know, where you hit Graham Rose to 4 or not to get your 100, you know, which is what happened.
Yeah, there's a blast from the past. Another old former colleague of mine from Llanellishan High School, Stuart Dyke, who of course was a stalwart of Cardiff Cricket Club. Now, you mentioned Ravi Shastri there, because in the late 1980s, Ravi had various spells with Glamorgan, but there was another overseas player, not a spinner, but a quick bowler, who actually played quite an important role, I think, as an advisor to you for what was happening in the winter months, because of course you'd graduated with an excellent degree in biochemistry, so the winters now were your own. And the overseas player I'm talking about, someone who's probably more well-known recently as a coach to South Africa, very brief international career with South Africa. I'm talking About Corrie van Zyl.
Absolutely, or as I like to call him by his full name, Cornelius Johannes Petrus Gerardus van Zyl. And if you could say that, you got the job. And I think because I could say his name, I got the job at Free State University. after he'd been at Glamorgan and at Cardiff Cricket Club as well. He wasn't fully fit when he came to us. He was very quick in the rebel tests in South Africa against Australia and the West Indies. He bowled very fast and did very well, and it was, on the face of it, a potentially good signing for Glamorgan. But at the time, it was very hard for him because, we had Ravi Shastri as #1 pro. Rodney Ongtong was probably bowling at his absolute peak and best in those days. So Glamorgan was looking to play on slow turning wickets at Swansea and Cardiff, and that presented limited opportunities for him. But a lovely guy, very bright, masters in mathematics, and he invited me down to join Free State University in I can't remember which year, maybe it was 88, I think, 88, 89, I can't remember that year. 88, has to be 88, yeah.
So, yeah. So you were now playing cricket in the winter in South Africa, coming back, playing in the summer for Glamorgan. Of course, Alan Butcher, who had now moved on from being just opening batter, had succeeded Hugh Morris as captain. So I suppose, when we talk about opening batters, one slot was already taken with Butch, and you were, and obviously with Hugh being there, churning out runs. You were churning out runs in the second team. Just talk us through you said it was a physical challenge playing so many days a week, but what about the mental side as well?
Yeah, cricket's a game of ups and downs, right? I mean, I played 10 years professionally, got 400 first class. So, you could say, that's a ratio of 4 over 10 times 365 days. You have 4, that's not good odds, is it? And even if you've got 30 first class hundreds in 20 years, they're not great odds. So you have to be able to, remain stable and resilient if you can. It's very tough from that perspective. You have your highs and your lows. And it's funny, isn't it? Because as I said earlier, my best year was 1989. I got 895 runs in first class cricket. I got my first class 100. I got 100 in first class cricket in South Africa the following winter. But things can veer for you or against you. So that year, Matthew Maynard. So I missed the last 4 games. I was dropped for the last 4 games of 1989 for the Morgan. Butcher decided that no, he wanted a slight change. My 900 runs weren't quite enough for him, and that's fine. But Matthew Maynard, who was great player, good friend, he got 1,000 runs and 1,035 runs at 27.97. He played 4 more games than me, and I got 895 at 27.96. And you just think, well, if you can just limp over the line to get the 1,000 under your belt, you're suddenly perceived differently as a player. But if you don't get there, that sort of branding and association is gone. And that season, and Steve Jones is a fantastic player, but that season, he averaged 25. So, I never quite broke through. And then coming back in 1990, which had different ideas, and sort of I started poorly then, and then the opportunity has to be won back. And that I find very hard, actually, in fairness, very hard.
And of course, by the time we're talking about 1990 and part of 1991, Glamorgan have made a decision that no, it's not going to be, although it was Ravi in 91, I'm talking about 1990, because Glamorgan have made a decision, quite rightly, to sign a certain Isaac Vivian Alexander Richards, if you're getting people's full names. So there you were with me in the shed at Sapphire Gardens, 1976, seeing Viv Richards play for Somerset against Glamorgan.
Yeah.
Roll the clock on 14 years, Canny, and there you are, changing alongside the great man in the changing Sapphire Gardens. What was it like having Viv in the team?
First of all, you're starstruck when you first meet him, aren't you? I remember watching that West Indies series in 1976 when he smacked it all around the ground, all around those brown outfields, and got 2 double hundreds, and you think, well, you know, what a player, and you see him win World Cups and things like this, and then you present it to him in a changing room. It's like, wow, this is, you know, and then you suddenly realise he's a guy. He has his approach to the game. And actually, he was also brilliant with younger players. Let me tell you, he was absolutely fantastic with the younger players, really encouraging, just trying to build confidence all the time. There's no doubt that confidence meant a lot to the way he conducted himself, and just did, you know, okay, he had the immense ability to be confident, but the two go hand in hand, I think. You know, you can increase your ability through confidence. So that was the everlasting thing. And then playing with him, of course, and batting with him was an absolute privilege. Never forget one game we were playing Leicestershire at Cardiff. Now, the thing about, for those who are of our age and generation, maybe on this call, you may remember CFAX, you know, in Cardiff, you know, pretty much a cosmopolitan place, you know, metropolitan, a lot of offices. And people used to watch the CFAX, they'd have it available to see. And if Glamorgan were doing well, they would come down and watch in the afternoon. So particularly on a Friday or a Thursday, you know, the ground would fill up later in the afternoon. People come out of the offices and, you know, God knows what excuse they gave. But I'll never forget this day. But there became a bit of a trend. If Viv was going to be batting, the ground would fill up. And if we were fielding, they'd all go home, you know. And I happened to be batting with him. And I think I got to 30 or 20 or 30. I've batted with him quite a long time. And the crowd had just built up. You know, I mean, there were thousands of people at Sapphire Gardens. You know, normally you get 200 and a couple of dogs, you know, and that would be a lot. But now, all of a sudden, this whole groundswell of Glamorgan cricket with Viv Richards. And so I was a bit of a recipient of that. And all I could think about was, don't run him out. Don't run him out. Don't run him out. That's all, you know, don't run him out. They'll all go home. So the more I blocked it, the more he started to play a few shots. But that shot that he used to hit when the ball would pitch middle and off stump and hit through mid wicket, to behold that from 22 yards is an absolute wonder to be able to say you've seen that. And the noise it made on his back was just different, very special.
Yeah, and all the time wearing a cap. We saw you earlier on wearing a helmet. Of course, he never in his career, certainly with Glamorgan, he eschewed the helmet, would always, I can remember that there was always that little bit of drama. The departing batter would go off and Viv wouldn't immediately be out. There'd be that little delay, that little sense of theatre, and then out he would come swaggering, chewing gum. And well, it must have, well, I can only imagine what it must have been like for the opposition to see the Master Blaster walking to the wicket. Happy days, 1990, a very happy year then for you, Canny, but 1991, the news probably every first class, every county cricketer dreads. Glamorgan making the decision. You weren't alone. There were quite a few players, quite a few fringe players, as I say, like your good self, who were found, or I should say, were deemed surplus to requirements. I am going to just tell a little story because I have heard this from a very reliable source, that one of your, I don't know if it was your final game for Glamorgan's second 11, but it was certainly towards the end. I believe it was against Northamptonshire at Ammanford or at the Bont. Anyway, it was at some nice ground in the west. And David Constant, the long-serving umpire, we all remember, had been on the county circuit seemingly forever. Of course, first-class umpires standing in both first team as well as second team. And Connie was there, the presiding umpire. You walked to the wicket and displaying your pithy sense of humour, Connie said to you, what would you like, Michael? Thinking that you were going to say 2 legs or middle, please, sir. And you said, so that everyone heard, can I have a new contract, please? And then I think Greg Thomas ran in, and if my source is correct, you actually then harpooned him somewhere for 6 over deep extra cover, and as if getting rid of your pent-up frustration. Is that a true story, Canny?
It's a very true story, and actually the context of that is quite interesting, because you know what, Alan Jones is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. Forget cricketer, but just as a guy, he is one of the most lovely people, and it was his job to fire me. All right, and it's tough, isn't it? Imagine working with a young guy from the age of 18, 19, and then you've got to give him the bad news. I think 8 of us went that year. I think the budget had been bust and all the rest of it. But he had the tough job of phoning us up and saying, "Listen, you know, bad luck. I'm really sorry, but you're not going to be retained." And you sort of shrug your shoulders, and then you're told, "But do report to Ammanford tomorrow." And you sort of think to yourself, well, why would I want to do that? And anyway, your good humour takes over and all the rest of it. It was a difficult time, no doubt about it, for any pro or for myself. But I'd say something in hindsight, Andrew. I'm pleased it happened then, right? In hindsight, I really am pleased. And for me, it was an absolute joy to play cricket for Glamorgan Seconds, Glamorgan under 19s, whatever. I can't think of many, when I look back, of many bad days. I really cannot, start to finish. I can't think of any people who I thought were bad people. So, you know, I played with the most wonderful people you can imagine, and great friendships. And actually, on the other side now, you sort of see them as they were. And it was fantastic. And so there was this competitive camaraderie that is very unique to professional and county cricket, in that, you know, only 11 can be picked and only 18 or 24 can be retained. So for me, it was an absolute joy. And anyone who has the pain of being released, you know, they should take care. And we've just lost Teggy, you know, at Cardiff, who was on the staff for a year. And, you know, it's tough, you know, but you can look back. You know, my counsel is, you can look back and say, actually, think of the good things you did and the joy you had. A lot of people give their right arm to do. So I have no regrets. I think the only thing maybe that I never probably broadcast enough was my success in South Africa, which was sort of just out of kilter with my county career, and that was something that I think I could have probably used to persuade people I had a bit of time left in me. So after I was released by Glamorgan in '91, I carried on playing provincial cricket in South Africa.
And of course, it was, in terms of the history of South Africa, it was an era, a pivotal moment in not just their sporting history, but a pivotal moment in their political, economic, social history, whichever version you want to say, because of course it was the end of apartheid, and you were there with Griqualand West. I think you also were with Bowland as well for a while, but you'd gone from the Free State to Griqualand West, and you were there not only captaining the provincial team, but also involved in going out into the townships, into the other areas, the black communities, and helping to push for integration. So talk us through those months, years.
It's quite interesting. So the first couple of winters I spent were in the Free State. Free State was an emerging province at that time, with the likes of Hansi Cronje, Alan Donald, Rudy Stain, and all these other sort of players who, Omar Henry was there. So I was involved with the Free State squad. And then after a couple of years, again, Free State decided they weren't going to retain overseas players. You know, I wasn't a test player, and then it was like, you know, been great. I played in the B team and I played first class cricket for Free State. But Griquas were interested in picking me up. So off I went to Kimberley, you know, the home of the old De Beers diamond mining. Interestingly and fascinating, that's where England are playing tomorrow in the One Day International. So amazing timing for this discussion. And I spent a number of years there and became captain for 2 years, which was probably the most rewarding cricket personally, and most fulfilling cricket I ever played. I seem to suit it. Maybe it's because I played fast bowling very well, and you didn't have those nagging little medium paces you had in county cricket where you'd nick off all the time. So I settled in and did, and it was most enjoyable. And I captained a cricket province. There can't be many Welshmen who have captained overseas first-class teams. And, you know, I'm really proud to have been one of those people. You know, and I'll be going back there after the over 50s World Cup to see some old friends and to go back there to Griqualand West. It's changed its name now to Northern Cape, you know, because things have changed in South Africa. The old names have been replaced with geographical representation. But a wonderful place to play cricket, an immense production alignment of cricketers who come from Kimberley and went on to play for provincial cricket through Griquas and onwards, and a very proud province as well, with some great heritage. So I was there at a time, and I'd been released by Glamorgan, and I was one of their overseas player, de facto overseas player, to play provincial cricket there. And they said, well, you know, what are your plans? And I sort of said, well, you know, we've got this contract to play Griquas one more year, and you know, I'll obviously see that out, and I'll see you go. And they said, well, do you want to? How do you feel about becoming our administrator? And there's a guy called Fred Swarbrick at the time, ex-Derbyshire, who was out there and would be running their cricket development program and director of cricket there. So I became director of administration and marketing and did fundraising, and then quite quickly they asked me to become general manager of the province. And then we embarked on a program and strategy to expand cricket in the area and take us forward. We'd had the backing of De Beers at the time, and they gave us the ground, and that was all very good. And that was through two guys, one called Des Clinical. Des Clinical was one of the most remarkable people I've ever met, true gentleman of the game, was chairman of Griquas at the time, and then a guy called Mike Doherty, who's one of Wisden's 5 cricket of the years in the 70s, an unsung hero of South African cricket, were driving forces behind it on the committee. And it was at a time when, and you'll have to just bear with me on the lingo here, you had the South African Cricket Union, which is the old white structure, and SACA, which is the South African Cricket Association, which was a non-white structure, and they would have the logo, you can't have normal cricket in a normal society. And around that time, Mandela had been released. In fact, I was playing in East London against Border the day he was released, actually, in a Castle Bowl game. And it was decided that in parallel with the negotiations around the development of the new South Africa, that SACA and SACU would go into negotiations to create the South African Cricket Board. And we would, in parallel, do the same to create our local cricket boards. So we would no longer be known as the Griqualand West Cricket Union, which had been in an original cricket province back in the 1880s, 1890s or whatever it was. We would be merged with the Griqualand West Cricket Association, the SACA equivalent and the union equivalent, to form the Griqualand West Cricket Board. And I was general manager of that. And in some ways, being as they say in Afrikaans, an uitlander, a foreigner, a non-belonger, made me a neutral position, gave me a neutral position and perspective as general manager of the province. So I'd be responsible for signing the professionals, working with the team and the infrastructure, a bit like, I would compare it to, say, Phil Clift as secretary of Glamorgan back in the day. That's the sort of size of infrastructure we were dealing with here. Because we were a small province, it's grown slightly since then. Or maybe the early days of Sophia Gardens, Andrew, you know. So that was the sort of relationship we had, and was very much involved in bringing together the local system, integrating the clubs. We had to bring different committees together from different backgrounds to set up the administration of the leagues. And that's where you learn a lot about culture, because actually we would often see white and non-white, because that's how I grew up and how South African cricket was presented to me. But it was nothing like that, actually. Within the what was considered to be the white community. You had divisions along English and Afrikaans, and within the in the non-white community, wasn't as simple as that either. You know, you had people from African backgrounds, you had people from Muslim backgrounds, Hindu backgrounds, and mixed race backgrounds. And you suddenly found you weren't just integrating white and non-white. Actually, you're integrating a lot of different cultures into a common structure, and that was a great learning for me that I've held to this day, to be honest, because you learn about different perspectives. It was difficult to manage the competing needs of different parts of the different communities, and there was a lot of conflict at the time. But we came through it, I think, pretty well at Greekwood. We did our best to give people opportunities, and we didn't sacrifice the standards either to be a first-class province. And that was important. And we actively managed it. And I took a cricket team down to what was an Hignell week, and that was probably Greekwood's first proper multiracial team at under 17 or under 19 level at the time. And it was just a great thing to be involved in, because the prevailing atmosphere was one of optimism at that time in South African cricket. You know, we've gone. They weren't in denial. Nobody was in denial of the situation. We had to integrate the sport, and India had been announced as the first cricket team to tour South Africa since they were kicked out in 1969-70.
And you had the great honour, I think it was in November 1993, it was the first competitive first-class match that an international test team had played in South Africa. I think that certainly since the Australians in 69-70, there had been a warm-up game against a Nicky Oppenheimer's 11, which was just a one-day trial practice game. But here you are leading a bowl 11. So a Welshman, not only leading a province, but a Welshman, and a very proud one at that, leading a South African provincial team against the Indian international team in the first competitive first-class match post-apartheid. And you very nearly marked that occasion with 100. I think, if my memory serves me right, if I've done my homework correctly, you'd got into the 90s, and then someone took the second new ball, and you were caught and bowled for 94, I think it was. What are your memories of that game and the pride you had of leading out that team?
I was immensely proud. So it's a bit like first and second division cricket in county cricket at the moment. The bowl was what you played for in what was called the B section, and I was captain of Greekwood, and it was decided as a part of the India team's warm up to have the first class game against. It was a 4-day game against a combined 11, which I captained, and it was a funny old game because there was more press there than crowd. All right, because you can imagine. Okay, this was it. South Africa's readmission to world cricket, and this was the kickoff game. Really, they had the Oppenheimer, which was more of a charity game than anything else to introduce them to the climate and raise some funds. And I've got some funny memories of it, despite the fact, you know, I did have a good first innings. I got 90 odd and got out in the second new ball. But my everlasting memory was. This thing had been, the PR behind this was massive. You know, this is a non-white team coming to post-apartheid South Africa after readmission. Okay, and you know, all the boxes were ticked, and the entire country was absolutely, really enthusiastic about it, and it was going to be a force for good for the integration of the game as well. So I'm captain, and Azharuddin is captain for the Indian team. And they put out all their stars that day: Kapil Dev, Chetan Sharma, Kiran More, Venkata Pajarathu, Anil Kumble, Mandrake, really had a real top quality team. They were acclimatizing themselves, so they put a good team out against us. Tendulkar, who was I think 17 at the time, was played in the match as well. He came in batted about 6. Anyway, so but one of my everlasting memories, it was, Andrew, I've got to tell you, Springs is quite hot and dry in the Eastern Transvaal, as it was called in those days. And it was the flattest wicket you'll ever see, all right? And I think we were expected to give them the toss out of courtesy, because they made the effort to come. They were the first touring team. And I thought, well, as I was walking out, we put our blazers on in the traditional style, myself and Hamid Azharuddin, we're walking out to this beautiful wicket, and I looked at it. And I knocked the surface of it, and it made a not a dissimilar sound to knocking the table here. And I thought, crikey, this is a good wicket, and I'm opening the baton, and it's a beautiful day. It's like 24, 26 degrees. I thought, we can just get through the new ball. There's a few runs here, but I think the whole world wants me to give them the toss, all right? And I thought, I can't do that. I can't do that, all right? I'm from Llanrumney, and you know, crikey, if I can get on this first, you never know, I can get a few. And the nice thing was, as we walked out together for the toss, he was incredibly courteous, and we were chatting away, you know. And then I flicked the coin up. I can't remember what he called, but anyway, I won the toss. So I turned to Azharuddin and I looked down at the wicket. Shook his hand and said, "Thank you very much, we'll bat." And the Indian culture is so polite, isn't it? All right. It's so wonderfully polite. And he said, "Thank you very much." And we walked back to the changing rooms, and he didn't say a word to me at all. And we batted, and I think we got 200 odd. I got 90 odd in the first innings, and they got 500, I think. Mandraker got 200. And then bowled us out quite cheaply as it started to turn in the second innings. So it's funny about the things you remember, rather than your own individual things. Those little moments of memory, I think, are the things that I'd like to share with people.
Yeah,
and it was absolute joy. And I was very proud, incredibly proud as a Welshman to captain that team. Yeah,
and your own very special place and a very important, as I say, not only part of cricket history, but social and political history in South Africa. Now, you mentioned a few minutes ago, Canny, about the fact it was the B grade, not the full Currie Cup. You were playing for the Bowl. But I believe then at the end of that season, you had an offer from Bowland to actually play in the A section. And that had been an ambition, obviously. So you'd been playing in the lower tier, and now an opportunity came to play in the higher tier. What was that like?
Well, actually, that was I knew I didn't have many years left, right? Because what I didn't want to do is get stuck, right, and be the journeyman pro into my mid-30s. I never wanted to do that. So I thought, well, I'll give this a go. I'll give this an absolute go. So I was very settled in Kimberley and Griqualand West, and with great friends, and I still have great friends there now. So that was a bit of a wrench for me, but I couldn't resist the opportunity to play. So I joined Bowland, and for those of you who don't know, Western Province is sort of the Cape Town area, and Bowland is slightly more up country, out of Paarl and Stellenbosch and those areas. So I joined him, and it was another fledgling province. I wasn't a test player, so I wasn't a superstar overseas player. But I got to tell you, at that point, I was playing as a local player, all right? And they didn't have hard and fast rules, like qualification rules. I'd learned to speak Afrikaans, and they thought, well, that's good enough. He can play as a local, all right? So I mean, that was really, Ali Bakr would say, "Oh, let Canny play. He's been around for a while now. As anyway." So I went and played as a local player, and Phil de Freitas was our overseas player at the time, a lovely man. And so I played in the warm-ups in of the season. I played against Western Province in a warm-up first-class match, and I played against Canterbury on tour. And I got a few runs in that game and a few wickets. And then I played my first Currie Cup game against Western Province, Stellenbosch, and I got injured, quite badly injured at the time. I'd hurt my back, and I had a couple of months of forced rest. after it. And that was the first time it happened to me. And I sort of thought, well, maybe that's a signal, you know. So I played a few more games in the B section for the Bull and B side, and I had a 2-year contract. And I said, I think I'm ready. I've had my fill. It's been absolutely wonderful. And Kevin Bridgens is their general manager, who's an old Western Province keeper. I said, listen, I think, can you release me for my second year? I think I'm going to go home. And that's what I did just before the Mandela election in 1994.
So one door in South Africa closes. Not quite the end of your cricket career, because returning to Cardiff, games as well in Huntingdonshire. And of course,
a few games over there. I have some good friends over at Ramsey, where I went to play a bit of club cricket when I lived across there, because I joined a company based in Cambridgeshire.
Well, let's talk about you coming back to Cardiff, because you'd had a stint as captain of Cardiff Cricket Club in 1991, and so you headed then off to Cambridgeshire and other parts of the world. So let's talk about that, because we're going to, without getting into all the chemical or the pharmaceutical details, but you'd had your career in, you'd read biochemistry. Did you need any other qualifications to move on up in terms of business skills?
You do, but not to start with, because you have an entry-level role. I should have mentioned, actually, I came back to Cardiff in '94, and the theme is you keep coming back to Cardiff.
Yeah.
I came back in '94 after my time in South Africa, and then got the job and moved on away from Cardiff again. And the theme is, there's a big theme: you keep coming back to Cardiff; it never lets you go. Okay.
Yeah.
But yes, you're absolutely right. So I had the science background. I'd never done what my mum would call a proper job. I'd been a cricketer since I left university. I was blessed, you know. I had 7 years without a British winter. You know, that's quite a thing, you know. And anyway, so I thought, what am I going to do? So I went down a sales marketing route, and as a pharmaceutical sales representative, and the training was absolutely second to none. It was 3 or 4 months before they let you near anybody to talk about products. So, you know, it sort of just reinforced for me the need for good training, and I got a good start. And
your MBA at Warwick?
Yeah, I'd been in the pharmaceutical industry, and I'd risen to sort of middle management up until the sort of late 90s, you know, quite comfortably rose through the ranks, sort of thing, and done a variety of jobs. But sort of then I took an international job to run distribution of pharmaceuticals across Africa, and it was, you know, sort of trade a little bit on my South African experience and my East African experience. I was based on Nairobi, and I sort of did that for about a year, and travel around Africa and setting up distribution and these sort of things. And it sort of really dawned on me that I'm a bit over promoted here, and I need to get a bit of a grounding. So I thought, well, I better get to I better get some qualifications here. You know, what should I do? Finance or something along those sort of lines. So I came back from Nairobi, which I wasn't based there permanently. I was just maybe out there 2 weeks at a time, and joined another pharmaceutical company and started my MBA at Warwick, and that was again another part of my life which projected my career forward quite rapidly after that. And you know, another theme is, you know, sort of people talk glibly about lifelong learning, but actually that's what you have to do. If you've been a sportsman and you had to change career in your late 20s or in your mid to late 20s, as I did, it sort of meant to me that I had to do something to either catch up or make sure my toolkit is strong enough to give me what I'm after out of my career. And so I did an MBA out of Warwick Business School. I did it part-time because I was working at the time. And during that time, you know, you suddenly become exposed to a different network, and the city came calling. and I joined Abbey National for a couple of years during and while I was completing my MBA, and I was a senior manager at the bank, director of one of the businesses subsequently, and then my toolkit was becoming rounded. My experience risk management was becoming more rounded. So I'd had a period in the pharmaceutical industry, gone through management, acquired my MBA, and then a couple of years in London in the city, and learned a whole set of new skills there, which stood me in good stead. And then I came back to the pharmaceutical industry a couple of years later after that, and then my toolkit was complete, and my career progressed very quickly after that.
Where did Huntingdonshire and Cambridgeshire, where did that fit in?
So my first job in pharmaceuticals was for a company based in, my first managerial position was for a company based in Cambridge. So I relocated, first of all, went to work in sort of Gloucestershire, and then moved across to Cambridgeshire, which meant I couldn't play for Cardiff anymore. I took a couple of seasons out because actually it was, you move in house and all these sort of things. And then I thought, well, I've settled into this community, lovely friends I still have there. People like David Jones, a very close friend of mine, and joined a club called Ramsey Career Club. Lovely club, real community club, similarities with Ponta de Lice actually in the way it was set up. They had their own ground. The bar and the clubhouse was the centre of community, and had a couple of 3 years playing cricket again there around that time till about 2002, I think that was. And still have very, very good friends there now and see them occasionally.
And you had a chance then to play a little bit of minor county cricket again?
Yeah, it was rubbish. I played for Huntingdonshire one game, I think, and I thought I don't want to do that.
I think you are the first and only Glamorgan player to play for Huntingdonshire. So if we can add that to your list of achievements, but
I think Andrew both should be relieved. All right.
We'll put it on your CV, on your cricketing CV. We'll put that fairly, with all due respect to Huntingdonshire. But your career was rapidly moving in another direction, and I don't know how many people on the call are actually aware that you actually then rose to the position of chair of the British Generic Manufacturers Association, BGMA, the trade association responsible for the pharmaceutical industry's relationship with the government. So I'm guessing here we are, the star cricketer from Llanrumley, now rubbing shoulders with, well, it's almost like a scene out of Yes Minister, was it? Well,
it was interesting that, because I joined a company called Alpharma in 2004 after my spell at Abbey National in the city, and suddenly we had these Icelandic investors at that time. I don't know if you remember, all this money used to flow from Iceland into the city of London, and they acquired this company and they called it Activist, and they cobbled it all together. And I was in the management team, and we were all appointed onto the board of that company and charged to grow the business as fast as we could. We had a factory down in Devon, fantastic facility that needed investment. So we had got the investment to upgrade it hugely, and we put together, a good business plan amongst the board and presented to the investors, and they were satisfied and just said in their true Icelandic style, "Oh, go for it. Yeah, let's do it." So we often did it, and we grew this very, very substantial business to the extent that we were the largest volume supplier of medicine to the NHS at the time. Now, I will counsel everybody on the call. There's two paths to the pharmaceutical industry in the United Kingdom. There's the originator industry, which does all the research and development, and they develop all the novel medicines and innovations that come to market that make a huge difference to humanity. And then there's the other side called the generics industry, which manufacture the products at very, very low cost and sell it to the NHS very cheaply after the product's patent is expired. Okay, and that's the sector which Activist was in. So we had this factory, and we would do amazing things. When a product came off patent, we would fly medicine in that had been manufactured in the site outside the European Union. the day after the patent had been launched, so literally at 1 minute past midnight, so that this cheaper medicine can get to the pharmacy to be dispensed, and reducing the costs to the NHS by billions over time. And it was a remarkable time to be involved, because it was at a time that people described that time in the industry as the patent cliff. So all the novel tablet and capsule medicines that we all take nowadays, blood pressure and all the rest of it, were developed in the 80s. And the patents were issued in the 70s. So they all expired after 2000 to 2020. So we used to talk about the patent cliff. So the relationship between the pharmaceutical industry, my sector, the generics industry, and the government was one of mutual need. Okay, we will bring low-cost medicines very quickly after patent expiry to save the NHS millions, and in return, we would become suppliers to the NHS in high volume terms, which is in itself good business to be in. So a part of that relationship was our trade association called the British Generics Manufacturers Association. So the basis was the manufacturing business, and I was elected their chair in 2010, which is still quite a while ago now. And I did that for a few years, and used to negotiate with government on the reimbursement systems and the mechanisms of how pharmaceutical reimbursement would take place, and also formulate jointly with the Department of Health industrial strategies to support the local manufacturing of medicine and a more robust supply chain. Some of which, in the pandemic, the lessons were learned from, some of which weren't, as you'll all be aware. Okay.
Did you rub shoulders with any famous junior ministers who've gone on to hit the headlines?
A few people like David Lammy still kicking about. He was Minister for Innovation and therefore Patents, Innovation Universities. Yeah. So you used to have meetings with him. The best one, I think, was the junior minister for what was medicines and industry supply and pharmacy. It's a bit of a mixed bag as a junior minister in the Department of Health. And he was a guy called Lord Howe, and he wasn't in the Commons, he was in the House of Lords, and a remarkable guy. He's in his 70s now. I think he might be leader of the Lords at the moment. I'm not sure. Lord, anyway, hell of a nice guy. But
Geoffrey Howe.
No, another Lord Howe. Not Geoffrey, another one. So I went to meet him, and we constructed through our trade association officials and the Department of Health officials what would be the we described as the compact to develop the generics industry over the next 5 to 10 years. And these sort of things can be pseudo-ceremonial with ministers. Everything's lined up and you're going to sign an agreement and all the rest. And I was chairman, and then we went. You sat there, and then you never meet a minister on his own. There's always a witness. Right? There's always a witness. So, in we went, and it was a lovely old building down in Whitehall, and had a chat and all the rest of it. Good to see you. And he said, well, it's an absolute pleasure. I believe things have gone really well between my officials and you, because that's how they would position. I said, it was very good. I said, but I've got to tell you, this is a first for me, because I have to say, I've never met a 7th Earl. Okay. And he said, well, a little bit embarrassed. He sort of shuffled and looked around. I said, but by the way, I've got to tell you, I'm from Llanrumney. Have you ever met anybody from Llanrumney? And he sort of jolted and he said, well, I can't say I have. I said, well, that's an absolute relief. It's a first for both of us. And that's a true story. And then we signed on the dotted line, and that strategic agreement between the industry and the Department of Health was made.
Well done. You can take the lad out of Cardiff, but you can't take Cardiff out of the lad, I think is the phrase. Good. Now, I mentioned Cardiff and places because by now, am I right in thinking, Canny, that you are now in Sonning Common near Reading?
Sonning Common, actually Boris Johnson's seat in Parliament, funny enough.
Indeed, that's what I was actually, I just wondered whether your paths had crossed with Boris or not.
Not personally, no.
No. What I find fascinating, and I think everyone on the call has been so impressed with your your articulate delivery. But what I find fascinating is you now move into local politics whilst you were there in Sonning, and you joined the local council.
Yeah, briefly. I mean, I sort of get to a stage in your career where you've got your medals, if you like, and you think, well, what else can I do or get involved in? So I did get involved in the parish council there, and I did consider whether a career in politics might be something of interest as a way of giving something back, which I've subsequently rejected. Never mind my political beliefs or which colour or which party. The parish council was apolitical, so I got involved, and there's some lovely initiatives. But democracy, I think, has been described as the best system we have, or the worst system. Take it for what it is. And I became chairman of the council, and it was quite enjoyable. The people are great. People give their time, their own personal time, for the goods of their communities. But in time, I realised it wasn't for me. Actually, the slow treacle of getting things done so slowly. And my motive at the time was to perhaps use the skills I'd acquired in my business career and all the rest of it to do some good. But to be honest, it just was like walking through treacle. So in the end, I sort of had some really good, polite conversations and said, listen, I think I'm going to have to step away from this. And thankfully, somebody else put their hands up to become chairman, and I stepped away, and that was that. But it was really interesting to see how the lower levels of government mechanics work. Having been involved in Whitehall and Department of Health, to get involved in some local stuff was enjoyable, but it did make me think it's not for me.
Yeah, I think it'd be fair to say I've known you obviously for many years, honest and true to your word, and you have always known your limits and areas where you know your boundaries, if I use the cricketing metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've taken a sort of early retirement, but just tell everyone what you're doing now. And you're back in Mumbles, but what do you do now in terms of paid employment? So
my work is mainly non-executive with a company called Day Lewis PLC, which is a large healthcare company. I sit on their board because it's a family-owned business. I sit on the management board of that as a non-exec and an advisor, and sometimes I take the lead on things for them, particularly where it's medicines or manufacturing related. And I sit on the boards of the subsidiary companies if they're manufacturing or distribution, and work with the management teams and there to hopefully make them get to make better decisions and all the rest of it. So 2 days a week, sometimes a little bit more than that, but that's my fill. I've got a lot of other stuff going on, not least the stuff that really excites me, like Welsh cricket, Wales over 50s, Valleys cricket, Cardiff Cricket Club. So that's filling more and more of my time as we move forward.
Yeah, just share with everyone. I know another. You mentioned Stuart Dyke, one of my other long-standing friends from the world of club cricket in Cardiff, and all things Llanishen and areas, and Liz. Well, we have to say in terms of David Ricketts, we must mention Lisvane Cricket Club because, of course, his father Bill was one of the founding fathers. But I know that you met up with Dave, who's got a young son, and playing alongside, so father and son there, playing for Cardiff Thirds. I gather you mentioned earlier that you're still playing for Cardiff Thirds, but making your reappearance after many years at Abercunnan, if my sources are correct.
Your sources are absolutely correct. So David Ricketts had harangued me. Cardiff had asked me to become their president, which I was an absolute honour to do. And they hadn't had a president since the late David Herbert, who'd done so much for the club. So I was honoured to be asked to do that. And then I sort of thought, we came out of the first lockdown and Ricketts had been going on and on about playing again. And I was sort of, I was in no physical condition to be honest. But I suddenly felt attracted to it, almost like, I wouldn't mind another little sniff. So off I went to play for Cardiff Thirds. It was one of these sort of mini leagues after the first lockdown. The full league program couldn't go ahead, and I was so nervous driving up the A470 up to Abercynon. All right, and we all get there, and there's people I'd played with back in the day, like Ian Bridgman, these other sort of players, and Jonathan Good and Dave Ricketts was there, Matt Phillips, all the boys, some old mates. And Ricketts says, "What do you want to bat?" I said, "Well, 7, 6, 5, I don't know. I haven't really played any competitive cricket outside playing for my village in Sonic Common." So I suddenly said, "No, I'll open. Go on, let me open." And then there's a lad who opened the ball. He's not a bad bowler at all, actually. His name's Matthew Taylor, who actually played professionally for Pontypridd, scrum half for Pontypridd for many years, and played Welsh in the 23s and all the rest of it. Anyway, he's opened the bowling for Abercynon, and he's a bit of a tearaway. In he comes, bowling these sort of away swinging to me, medium paces, and I've hit the second ball straight to cover for naught after the 20-odd years I was waiting for my proper comeback. And that can do two things to you, can't it? It can say, "Mate, the writing was on the wall years ago, give it up." Or it can say, "Right, I'm not leaving it there. I decided there is no way I'm leaving it to Matthew Taylor, Tinker Taylor, all right, to get my wicket and then give up." So I thought, no, I'm going to give it a go. And I can tell you now, this renaissance, I have not looked back since. And I would say to anybody on the call who's just half considering playing a sport they used to play in their 50s, in their earlier life, just go and do it, and everything else will take care of itself. Your mental well-being, your physical fitness, and all the other things that go with it. Just go and do it and have a great time, because actually as you get older, you play for different reasons. It doesn't hurt so much when you hit Matthew Taylor to cover for naught, right? Like it used to when I was playing for Ramsey in Cambridgeshire at the back end of my capability, or when you're dropped by Glamorgan on the morning of the game and told to drive to Bristol, and that hurts, all right? No, it doesn't hurt so much now. You play the game for what is actually the joy of the game, because that's where we started out, Andrew, when we were kids.
Absolutely.
When we watched Glamorgan in that shed, when we picked up a bat, or we did a paper round to buy a cricket bat, it was the feeling of joy that was going to give us while we started it. And actually, it's a great feeling for me to have that feeling of joy again, without the pressures that go with it. And I've got to tell you, there's some people who are absolute magnificent people involved in the game of cricket, who continually give back and work so hard. And that's what the over 50 setup has been like, and that is what Cardiff Cricket Club has been like. And Cardiff Cricket Club is not alone in that. You have clubs out there in the valleys who continually develop their communities.
Well, let's just talk a little bit more. You said about giving something back, and I know that you've set up a fundraising scheme. I know that you've already raised over £15,000 for young cricketers. It's called Walking Through the Valleys. So Canny, just finish off our talk this evening by just telling us about your work and what's inspired you, and what are your hopes for this initiative in the future.
So back to that game in Abercynon, and then playing again for Cardiff Thirds. As I said, I started in 1980 playing for Cardiff Thirds, and we used to play a lot of the Valleys clubs then, and it sort of replayed it back to me, and actually I got to know a few of the guys, because you sort of played them quite regularly. People in Abercynon, the Williams brothers, and others, people in Pontypridd, and others. So we sort of thought, a few of us thought it was a good idea to do a bit of a sponsored walk. So, you know, between maybe Hopkinstown, Cardiff, and Pontypridd and Abercynon, you know, let's do a sponsored walk. We thought it was a good idea. Let's walk up the Taff Trail, you know, Cardiff to Brecon. That's got a bit of a sound to it, doesn't it? You know, people might chuck in a few quid and put some money in the bucket for that. So we sort of got quite excited about it, and we asked about, and Mackham joined. So 5 clubs have got involved in the Valleys and Cardiff, and myself and Matthew Taylor, who I talked about earlier, decided to let's see if we can reach out to some of our old mates in rugby and cricket and see if they'll just do little video clips for us, and we can put it on our little Facebook site and all the rest of it. And started writing emails and sending texts to people. And you know what really inspired me was people want to support these sort of things. People want to give of themselves, of their own free time to make a difference, because everybody knows the benefit of cricket. And these clubs are unique because they're community clubs. They mean more to those communities than just the game of cricket in Hopkinstown, Mackham, Abercynon. You know, they are the centre of their communities. It could be the rugby club or the cricket club, and they need more support. And they're top people, great people to be with. So we did this walk, and it sort of grew its own life, Andrew. In that, the more of this social media we did, the more of a response we got, and the more of a response we got, the more donations that we got. So we got more videos of people like Matthew Maynard and Alan Donald and the chief, you know, and all sorts of people would, and we asked them, the chairman and the captain of each club, to do a video and, you know, asking out for funds, and then we would get that shared, and local radio got involved, and all of a sudden 90 people went on this walk, you know, and it was absolutely brilliant, and we raised some money. But I think also we sort of created good and mutual understanding between some of these clubs, which is really nice. And I've got a great affinity for them, because I think clubs in the Valleys have had a second-hand deal in Welsh cricket, personally, over the 43 years I've been involved. You know, if you look at the profile of where cricketers have come from, you know, they've all sort of pretty much come from Cardiff or East Wales, or particularly the Swansea area, which is particularly prolific. Cardiff more recently, and Newport. Very few players have come from the Valleys, and yet these are the toughest, most competitive people you'll ever meet. Now, it sort of got me thinking, actually. You know, you look at Ben Stokes. What separates him from the crowd is his resilience, his competitiveness, not just his ability. There's something else to him, and I sort of see that in these communities. I think, well, you know, these are the people who I would have in the trench if I was going to war, you know. And I just thought in the back of my mind, maybe a couple of guys from the Valleys can play for Glamorgan one day and go win cups, you know. Tough people like Ben Stokes who can take the rough with the smooth, as difficult as it's been for him, and still produce. So in the back of our mind, myself and Matthew, that was something we talked about a lot. And then it grew, and people got involved, and it's been an absolute joy for me. And we've now got 11 clubs this year, and we're just about to launch our run-up campaign, because it happens at the end of March, early April. And we've had great support from Cricket Wales and from Glamorgan, who got right behind us. So this year we have Abercynon, Cardiff, Ebbw Vale, Hopkinstown, Mackham, Mountain Ash, Porth, Pontypridd, and Upper Rhondda. So we've got the, you know, we spread from out into the Cynon and Rhondda valleys, the big and little Rhondda, and across to Gwent now. So I'm hoping, and we've had our kickoff meeting, and I'm hoping people really get behind it. You know, we desperately need a main sponsor, because it's got to be a little bit big for us all. But you know, please, I ask everyone on the call when the time comes to please share the social media feeds, and you know, maybe people can put £2 in a Just Giving site that can make a big difference. Now, why is it so important that these clubs are supported? Because traditionally they haven't had good youth infrastructures, right? they haven't been as self-reliant as they could have been, right? But actually that's changed and they want to make a difference themselves, right? So you're seeing in these clubs, them all starting both youth cricket at different age groups. And I think you've seen some of this, Andrew, recently in the last couple of years. This is not my doing, by the way, it's theirs. Please, I'm just a messenger here. And I think they'll make a big difference to young people's lives, and that's boys and girls, all right? In communities where people need a bit of a leg up. And so cricket gave me a leg up from Llanrumney into Cardiff Cricket Club, into Glamorgan, into provincial cricket in South Africa, and then subsequently into my career, my professional career, and how that helped me. It wouldn't have happened without cricket. I can tell you now, a boy from Llanrumney would not have been sat across from ministers in Whitehall if he hadn't come through the cricket system. So I'm a real strong believer that that cricket can make a huge difference to people's lives and get the joy of playing the game as well. You know, so that really inspires and motivates me to make a difference to those clubs who need it. I could go coach at Monmouth School, but they don't need it. You know, what people need is the toolkit to help themselves.
I've got a final question, Canny, but I think I know the answer. We've been talking for nigh on 2 hours about, as you said, about your journey from Llanrumney to the second 11 circuit, to the first team, to South Africa, all around the world as a businessman. Would you change anything?
No, nothing, absolutely nothing. You can't think like that, because it's those experiences that make you what you are today, and I feel pretty blessed to be where I am and where I am today. Yeah,
that's knowing you as I do, that was the answer I expected. So, Canny, I must say that one thing that I'm sure has impressed everyone on the call this evening is your down-to-earth common sense, your honesty, your drive, your passion for the game, your passion for doing good, almost in a quasi evangelical way, if I go like that. Now on your shirt, yeah, there we are. No, the other side. It says ICOM MJC. Now I know that's it. I know that there you are, Michael John Cann. But I think you will, having heard your plans for the future of Welsh cricket. I know the folk at Cricket Wales think very highly of you, and I think that you are going to be an icon in helping us to breed the next generation of Glamorgan cricketers. And it's been a real pleasure this evening to share a couple of hours in your company. I know we've kept in touch over the years, wherever you've been, and we've seen each other, had the odd drink, small drink, as we said, here or there. But it's great that you're back here in South Wales, and your passion, your vision, your desire to improve and to make things better, and to call on loads of the good eggs of Welsh cricket is so laudable. So, Canny, thank you so much for being with us this evening, starting the year 2023. And I must say that Andrew Salter is going to have a very hard job because hopefully towards the back end of February, he'll be joining me. I will say some people on the call may know that the Glamorgan cricketers are actually, hopefully, going on a pre-season tour to Zimbabwe in early March. So I'm hoping that the week before everyone disappears, or the playing staff and coaches disappear off to Zimbabwe, that Andrew Salter can spend a little bit of time with us. But he's got a very hard, so Glamorgan's current off spinner has got a very hard job to follow from one of the previous purveyors of off breaks. So there will be further information on the Glamorgan website about the evening with Andrew Salter, and I'm hoping as well I had a chat with Colin Ingram not long ago. I'm hoping that Colin will be joining us as well as we approach the start of the season. So that's where we are moving forward. So thank you everyone who's on the call this evening, and a great start to the year from a great man, Michael Cann. Thank you very much.